Hey everybody, welcome to the Rockshow. This is episode 206, and today we'll be talking about the band Public Image Ltd. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How you been?
I'm all right. I'm doing good. Keeping busy, enjoying the end of the summer here.
So we're doing this one now, and then after this, we're doing Aerosmith in the 70s.
Yeah. The next episode will be about Aerosmith's albums in the 70s, which to me is really their best period. Unfortunately, they kind of decided to hang it up as a live act recently. Steven Tyler is not doing well. But today we're talking about Public Image Ltd, who I feel is one of the most interesting bands of all time. Fronted by John Lydon, also known as Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. The band was formed in the late 70s in the aftermath of the Pistols breaking up. You familiar with their music, Rob?
You know what? I wasn't until I started looking this up. I really didn't listen to them, tell you the truth. They weren't like one of the...
Yeah, but some of the songs are on jukeboxes around. And, we've especially the song Public Image is still, you still hear that in the bars and stuff like that, But before we even get into anything, I want to talk about this shirt I'm wearing. Can you see it?
Yeah, you got to put, right there.
Mineola Diner.
Nice.
Right? And basically, want to kind of hype this place up a little bit. It's been around for 75 years. They have fantastic food in there, but you got to get there early. They close by mid-afternoon. Like I said, they've been there for 75 years. One of the managers, Shane, was talking to him recently, and he's a great guy. If you're into omelets, they have like the fluffiest omelets you've ever seen. If you like a light omelet, they're perfect. Okay, they got tons of other food, and I'm just happy to plug them a little bit.
It's a diner. So they have everything.
It's an old school diner, like you would, something from the 50s or something, like that kind of look. It looks almost like a little train on the corner of Willis Avenue and Jericho Turnpike in Mineola, which is in Nassau County, about 20 minutes east of the Queens border. So we have a little deal with them. Shane and I were talking the other day. And if anybody watching the show wants to come in and check the place out, have something to eat, if you mention Rocker Mike, you will get a free cup of coffee or a free soda, whatever you want.
And I think we should also plug the nostalgia, the truth behind the crime.
Yeah, the Gnostic TV.
Gnostic TV, that's right.
Gnostic TV that we just got affiliated with. We have a new series on there called The Truth Behind the Crime. There is a paywall for this. It's not expensive. For the year, it could be about $30, and you get all our content and all of Gnostic's content. There's a lot of shows on there, too, that are fantastic. We'll put a link up for that. Make sure you mention Rocker Mike to get the discount with Gnostic TV. And, so let's get on with Public Image Ltd.
Yeah, man. They were around. They're still around now.
Yeah. They released a new album recently. Haven't had a chance to really check it out yet. But like I said, basically they came out of the ashes of the Sex Pistols. That was in 1978 that the Pistols broke up. Now, a friend of John Lydon's named Dennis Morris, who was a photographer, suggested to Lydon that he travel to Jamaica. He was going to do some work for Virgin Records, who were the Pistols were signed to. And basically he would be scouting reggae bands. Okay, he was looking to sign reggae bands. He was supposed to only be there for about a month, but he ended up spending about 6 months in the country because there was such an emerging new reggae scene around that time. And Virgin Records was looking to put these new bands on a special label called Frontline Records. Okay. And, John Lydon was single-handedly responsible for signing a lot of those bands that ended up on that label. I'm a big fan of a lot of that stuff, that late 70s, early 80s reggae from the people from Jamaica, but they kind of got their fame in the UK. Good stuff out there. But that was just something he had going on. I don't know if he intended to start a band at that point or not. I think he was looking to maybe join another band. In fact, a band that already existed that there was a push to have him front was Devo.
Wow.
Okay. That would have been interesting if he had joined Devo as their singer. Richard Branson, who was the head of Virgin Records at that point in 78, decided to fly Devo to Jamaica, where John was staying and working. And, he was going to put Lydon in the band, and Devo didn't go for it. So that got nixed. I think the guys in that band were just way too into doing their own thing to have somebody come in and kind of take over, But it would have been an interesting project. However, when Lydon got back to England after his reggae thing, he was looking to put a band together, but he was having a problem finding musicians. So he decided to go up to the north of England, where he was hearing that there was some, musicians doing interesting things. He got in touch with an old friend of his named Jah Wobble. Okay. Jah Wobble is a bass player. He was originally, his real name is John Wardle. Okay. John Wardle. And he was originally part of what was called the Gang of Johns. And if you know your Sex Pistols history, the Gang of Johns was Lydon, John Wardle, a guy named John Gray, and John Ritchie, who became Sid Vicious.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was like a little gang of friends that they had before the Pistols. So he looked up Jah Wobble, okay, and they had actually jammed a little bit in recent months. Okay, so it wasn't that they hadn't seen each other in a while. They just were kind of like dicking around and jamming around a little bit. Now, one thing Lydon was intent on doing is not just recreating a Sex Pistols sound. Okay, Public Image Limited in whole is probably one of the most avant-garde bands I've ever heard. All right, what I mean by avant-garde, I mean like they're really like you never know what to expect from them. They're very, avant-garde is kind of maybe now it has like an artsy fartsy kind of connotation, and I get that. Okay, but there's nothing artsy fartsy about Public Image Limited. They're a tough pill to swallow. Okay, because they don't really follow musically. A lot of their songs aren't catchy and things like that, especially the early stuff.
The Velvet Underground would consider kind of avant-garde.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be, I mean, the Velvet Underground I would compare them with Public Image Limited in that sense.
Yeah.
But now Lydon wanted to get into reggae, bring a reggae sound into it. So did Wobble. They were both interested in like dub reggae and things like that. Okay. Now they also approached guitarist Keith Levene. All right. And Lydon and Levene had become acquainted while touring in mid-76 when Levene was actually still in The Clash. Keith was an original member of The Clash that split. Okay. Now at the time, Lydon and Levene had both considered themselves outsiders even within their own bands, and if you know your Pistols history, Lydon was kind of an outsider.
Yeah.
With the other three guys, even today, it's still kind of that sense. The Sex Pistols recently reformed to do some gigs without Lydon.
Yeah.
So he's still kind of an outsider. The gentleman named Jim Walker, he was actually a Canadian, okay, and newly arrived in the UK. was recruited to play on drums. Lydon and Wobble had put an ad out in Melody Maker in May of '78 about needing musicians for a band, and he answered
That
that.
would surprise me that that's the way a lot of band forms. They just put an ad and they get some musician. Like Molly Crew did that, you know, it's pretty
Kiss
funny.
did that. You know, Kiss put ads out in the paper. That was the way to do it in those days. People
But that's so
wanted
weird that you just put an ad. It's like you would think these people were together for a long time and playing together. Because this band, Public Image Limited, they had a lot of band members. There was a lot of people that came and gone. It was like a revolving door.
Right. I mean, it's true. They did have a lot of band members, and I'll get into that because eventually Public Image and John Lydon become unmistakable. You know, they're really the same thing.
Yeah.
So this lineup, this original lineup, started rehearsing together in mid-May of '78, and they didn't have a name at that point. In July of '78, Lydon officially named the band Public Image. There wasn't a limited yet at the end, just Public Image.
Public Image.
Okay, and it was named after the novel by Muriel Spark called the Public Image, a late '60s novel that was influenced Lydon. They would add in July of '78 the Limited at the end, Public Image Limited. Once the band and got trademarked and incorporated, they took that Limited at the end. Okay. They wrote a song. Lydon wrote a song called Public Image, which is always one of my favorite songs of all time and one of their best songs. It debuted in October of '78. And he had actually written this during his time with the Pistols. Perhaps if the Pistols had continued, they would have used this song. I guess it has some elements of a Pistols sound to it. So naturally, it was a good bridge between the Pistols and what he was looking to do. The song is about basically Lydon feeling exploited by Sex Pistols manager Malcolm McLaren, and the stories with that is you could do whole podcasts on that.
Oh yeah.
They eventually ended up in court in the '80s and would get money back from McLaren. It was a whole mess. McLaren ripped them off very badly. This single, Public Image, reached number 9 on the UK charts, and it did well as an import in the US. People were starting to be interested in what Lydon was doing. The Sex Pistols went down in flames, but Lydon came out of that and put a band together. I think people were impressed with that.
Think about the Sex Pistols only had one album. Public Image had a bunch of albums.
Oh yeah. I mean, really, if you think about Lydon as an artist, it's really Public Image that defines him. He's done nothing as long. I mean, that's really been his baby, and and of course the Sex Pistols are iconic, and that album is timeless. But he's much more than that. You know what I mean? And I think the other 3 members, I would leave. Well, Glenn Matlock went on to a pretty good career, but Lydon did some very creative things in that time period after the Pistols, especially '80s into the early '90s, I would say. So the band was ready to record their studio album, which would be called Public Image First Issue. And they ended up spending like their whole recording budget before the record was even done. As a result, the final album comprised of 8 tracks of kind of varying sound quality, half of which were written and recorded in a rush after the money ran out. The album was released in December of '78. Now, saying all that doesn't mean it's a bad album. I think it's a very good album. It's just got kind of a disjointedness a little bit to it. The sound quality on some tracks are better than others, and but the songwriting I think is fantastic. Again, the single Public Image was driving this album. Okay, there was a track called Low Life. All right. And that's been also kind of regarded as a an attack on Malcolm McLaren as well. Okay, though Lydon had stated that the lyrics kind of refer to Sid Vicious as well. So again, he's drawing from his personal experiences. There's a 2-part song on there called "Religion," which is basically an attack on the Catholic Church as Lydon sees it. That's another song that kind of had its roots in the time in the Pistols. But even the Pistols, maybe it would have been a different song musically, but the lyrics that Lydon wrote, even the Pistols were reluctant to record them. Okay, there's some tough words in that song. Now, the closing track, called "Fodder Stomp," heavily was influenced by reggae dub. Okay, and it's about 8 minutes long, and it has a circular bass riff through the whole thing, played over Lydon and Wobble's double act of lampooning public outrage, love songs, teenage apathy, while openly acknowledging the lack of effort being put into it. Okay, so it's really kind of like one big complaint, the song.
Yeah.
Okay? At the end of the song, you hear what turns out to be a fire extinguisher being let off in the studio when they were recording.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. You just showed the album cover there. That photography was done by Dennis Morris, right? Okay. And he created the Public Image Limited logo also, which that circle with the PIL written in it. Wobble has said that Public Image Limited was the simple thing of 4 different people doing different drugs at different times. Okay, it was only in any way together for the first 2 months of its existence. We had a fucking good drummer called Jim Walker, but he fucked off after a few months in early '79, and then it just all fell apart. Somehow it had sort of death throes that produced a couple of blinding albums. So what he's saying is, like, even though the band, kind of like was all over the place, they kept it together, but then their death throes, they went through a few albums like that. Kind of accurate. All right. 2 albums in '79 and '80 I need to discuss here. Okay. One is called Metal Box, and one is a live album I'll get into.
Yeah.
Now, the departure of Jim Walker made way for a series of new drummers that would kind of join the band one after another. Auditions were later held at Rollerball Studio in Tooley Street, London Bridge. David Humphrey was their second drummer, who went on to record 2 tracks at Manor Studios in Oxford, the songs Swan Lake and Albatross for the Metal Box album. Death Disco, was also known as Swan Lake, was released as a single in '79 and reached number 20 in the charts. It's a track that they still play to this day when Public Image plays. It's one of their best. The majority of the drumming on the album Metal Box was provided by Richard Dudansky, formerly of the 101ers, the band Joe Strummer from The Clash was in. Pill's drummer from April to September of '79 was Richard Dudansky. Okay. He would then be replaced by Carl Burns of The Fall. Okay. Another interesting experimental band. And then he would be replaced by Martin Atkins. And the recording, this was all during the same recording sessions. And the recording and practice sessions were totally chaotic. Atkins said in a 2001 interview that his audition was playing Bad Baby during a recording session, which was taped and released.
Oh, my God.
Okay. Atkins was Pill's drummer from '79 to '80, and then '82 to 1985.
Why was it so chaotic? Were they just doing drunk and like drugs and drinking?
I think it was that. I think it was a lot of that, and a lot of just, all over the place as far as the direction they were going to go.
So a lot of tomfoolery there, and a lot of tomfoolery and playing some music.
Tomfoolery, exactly.
Imagine those motherfuckers in the room just chilling and playing and just getting fucked up.
And I think there was a lot of arguing going on there.
Yeah, I can see that.
So Metal Box was originally released as 3 untitled 45 RPM 12-inch records. Okay, meaning, full-size album size, like what 33 would be. Okay, but you had to play it on 45. It was 3 like that. Okay, in a metal box resembling a film canister.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you have this, it's very valuable. Okay, I've seen it in stores. I've known people that have had it. It's worth like, oh God, I don't even know what number, but it could be worth in the thousands, maybe low thousands if you have it. Okay, it had the PIL logo embossed on it. Okay, on the metal, and later on it would be reissued and called Second Edition, and reissued just on regular vinyl as a double LP set. Basically, the band became known for these, at this point, for these hypnotic dub reggae breaks in their music, abrogated guitar breaks, meaning like very twangy kind of guitar, and very like stream of consciousness vocals that, over Lydon's very kind of shrill voice. Okay, like I say, it's a tough pill to swallow. Probably this album is probably their most, as far as what they're known for, exactly that. Okay, what pill was at that point is this record. Very avant-garde. How it even got into the top 40 is kind of almost a miracle, I think. Well, it just shows that, Lydon's ability to still attract an audience. Yep, that's it right there. Metal Box. Okay. Recently, as of this summer, Jah Wobble was around. He kind of redid this album all in dub, and he played it. And I was considering going, but in the last minute, I kind of backed out. I'm not sure if I want to hear this whole album done in dub reggae, but it's interesting. There's a lot you could do with it. So, Public Image Ltd. had a series of contentious live shows at this point. And there was some behind-the-scenes controversies that went on, especially during their American tour in 1980. Their appearance at the Grand Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles was fraught with hostilities between Lydon and the audience. Tensions off stage mounted as well. Public Image Ltd. demanded that they work only with local promoters bucking the promotional machinery of Warner Brothers Records at that time, their American label, they were on Warner Brothers in America. For both the LA and San Francisco appearances, Public Image Ltd. agreed to work with David Ferguson and his independent CD Presents label. This business arrangement pitted the band and CD Presents in a pitched battle against San Francisco-based promoter Bill Graham, who negotiated with concert venue owners and San Francisco government officials to deprive Public Image Ltd. of a concert location. Fearing public outbursts if the show was canceled, San Francisco city officials instead opted to allow the CD Presents sponsored event to proceed. What they were doing is, there was politics behind this, okay? Lydon and the band didn't want to deal with the corporate level of promotion, or really even recording, okay? I think they realized they needed a label, obviously, to get the music out there, but they wanted to have a very limited dealing with these record labels, and the record labels that control the promotions, and also a guy like Bill Graham, who was basically, had his thumb on everybody in San Francisco. You couldn't put a show on without him knowing about it. And they circumvented him. So the only reason that things went their way and these shows were able to go on was because the city was afraid there would be riots.
That's good, man.
Outside these venues if they got canceled. So it's interesting.
But those people will riot because they even with the Sex Pistol people, they were rioting.
Well, there was fights and riots outside Pistol shows, and especially the American tour where they toured the South and had to face up against cowboys and shit like that in the audience. And there was a lot of spillover from that. It was in recent memory. I mean, it was within 2 years of that. Okay, that kind of stuff. So people were probably looking for a little violence. Now, in May 17th, 1980, exactly, the group appeared on American Bandstand. Okay, the show hosted by Dick Clark for many years. The performance of Pill was chaotic. They abandoned lip syncing. If you go back and you look at this, I think it's on YouTube. Lydon just they're playing the song. He's not even pretending to sing. He's just lurking around and he's trying to get the audience on stage. Okay, and he's joking around with the audience, and he's not singing the song, but yet you hear his voice in the background because they're playing the song. Okay, but Clark actually named it one of his favorite shows of all of American Bandstand. Okay, in June of 1980, Lydon and Keith Levene went on the Tomorrow Show on NBC, which was hosted by Tom Snyder. It was a late night talk show. Okay, a lot of great acts went on Tom Snyder. There's a particular one with the Ramones that's great, but this one was contentious. Actually, the Ramones one was contentious too, but this was contentious. At one point, Snyder asked Lydon if Public Image Ltd was a band at all. Okay, like what are you even a band? And Lydon replied he said, "We ain't no band. We're a company. Simple. Nothing to do with rock and roll. Doo-dah," like that. His wise ass attitude. Okay.
He's always a wise.
Always. Now, the segment on the show actually ended with Snyder kind of apologizing to the audience. He said the interesting part is that we talked to these two gentlemen a couple of weeks ago, did a pre-interview. Apparently that went all just fine, and it made great sense to go ahead with the show. And what he read about them this afternoon, but somehow it got a little lost in translation tonight. And Snyder said, "That's probably my fault." So if you go look at it, it's really no big deal. It wasn't like they're screaming at each other, but it was just an awkward interview. And later on, many years later, in 1997, Lydon would go on again by himself with Tom Snyder. And Snyder actually apologized for that interview years earlier.
Oh, yeah? That's funny.
Yeah. And Lydon kind of shook it off by saying, it's just entertainment. Don't worry about it. All right. And then that interview went very well. Snyder is a guy that I miss as far as like late night TV. He was a good interviewer, interesting, very open-minded. He'd have anybody on, and I always enjoyed his shows. So the other record I want to mention that came out in 1980 was their live album called Paris au Printemps. Okay, and this would be the last album with Jah Wobble. On this release's album sleeve, the band's name and all of the tracks were translated into French. And the album cover was a painting that John Lydon did depicting himself, Keith Levene, and a woman named Jeanette Lee. Okay. In May 1981, Public Image Ltd appeared in New York at the Ritz. All right. This was another contentious thing. They played behind a projection screen. If you remember the Ritz, they always had a screen that would come down.
Yeah.
That they would project images on, like cartoons or whatever, shit like before a show.
Yeah.
Well, they left that up during their performance. So you couldn't see the band. You could only kind of make out shadows behind it. Okay. Wow. And basically Lydon, Levene, and Jeanette Lee, who was in the band at that point, were joined by a new drummer, 60-year-old jazz player Sam Ulano, who had been recruited for the gig from a bar, having apparently never even heard the band before. Public Image Limited were played simultaneously through the PA. Lydon taunted the audience who expected to hear familiar material or at least see the band, and then a riot broke out. Okay. And this was back in the day when bottles were given out at the bar.
Okay, they were throwing bottles.
Yeah. So glass bottles were being flung at the band, okay, and the screen, all right. And equipment fell down, okay, like amplifiers and shit collapsed off the side.
It was chaos.
Yep. And they were supposed to play 2 nights. The next night was canceled.
Didn't the other guy? That's like a Gigi Adams show. 3 songs.
Right.
Get the fuck out of here.
Right. Without the shit. So later in 1980, Jah Wobble would leave the band. And he never was really formally replaced after that point. The next album, called The Flowers of Romance, it really didn't have any bass parts in it. Had some, okay, but they actually brought back Martin Atkins to play drums on that album, The Flowers of Romance. Levene had by then largely abandoned guitar in favor of playing the synthesizer. And he was kind of picking up a new technique with that after befriending Alan Ravenstein of Per Ubu, okay, who were keyboard influenced. Atkins' propulsive marching band style drumming, the lack of bass and guitar, and Lydon's increasing lyrical abstraction, that's the album cover right there, made this album a difficult listen for rock fans, and contemporary reviews expressed great confusion. The record consists mostly of drums, vocals, and tape loops, okay, with only a little bit of a gesture toward bass. Levene would play a little bass here and there, and the keyboards. Now, the title Flowers of Romance was the name of a short-lived band that featured Keith Levene, Viv Albertine, who would be eventually in the Slits, and Sid Vicious himself in 1976, before he was in the Pistols. I think they had one show they played. Okay, they were just going to be like, and I think Sid, if I remember right, was actually on drums on that band. There's a track on there called Francis Massacre, which was partially inspired by Lydon's brief imprisonment in Mountjoy Prison in Ireland. Okay. What happened was, briefly, is that year he had gone to Ireland. Now, Lydon is of Irish descent. Okay. His parents were from Ireland, but he grew up in England. And, but when he first came to Ireland in this band, they weren't received very well. I think the Irish didn't take to the fact that they were a British band and kind of like maybe for the monarchy, which I don't understand why, because they, God Save the Queen by the Pistols is not exactly pro-monarchy song. Okay. I think there was a lot of confusion as to what Lydon was about. And he was in a pub in Ireland, and they wouldn't serve him, first of all.
Wow.
Okay. And I mean, for someone not to serve you in an Irish pub,
that's pretty
they don't
bad.
like you. They don't like you. Okay. There's a problem there. So the way he described it is he blocked a policeman's punch with his face.
Wow.
With his own face. And was dragged off to jail. All right. And a fight had broken out in the pub and all that. And the police, the guards and stuff, they humiliated him in jail. They stripped him naked. Oh, they shot him down. They shot him down with a hose. Naked. All right. I mean, it's funny, but it's not. I mean, it's fucking torture.
You know what it is? They made a sample out of him. You want to be a little shit?
Yeah. So that's, and they really, I think Lydon is, if you know Lydon, he's very pro Ireland. Okay. Yeah. He was tight with Shane MacGowan, who wrote songs about the IRA, and even though he was an Irishman that was, brought up in England as well, with ties to Tipperary and Ireland and all that. We've talked about that on other shows, but I think he was just a big misunderstanding, and he would not play Ireland for many years after that. So this song, Francis Massacre, on Flowers of Romance is influenced. There's some lyrics in there that reference the, not giving in and not changing his views and, about being arrested.
Yeah.
So there's another track called Jaime's Hymn, and it started out as an instrumental piece, and it was intended for the score of Michael Wadley's crime horror film Wolfen. Do you remember that movie?
No, Wolfen
came out in 19. I think you do if you Wolfen, Wolfen. I believe the song never got in the soundtrack, but it was intended to originally. Wolfen was a low budget horror film starring Gregory Hines, I think, was in it. Okay.
I might have seen it.
And it's basically these like wolf-like creatures that go back. They were worshipped by Native Americans, and they get loose in New York City, and they kill people. Okay, they just tear you to pieces. They're these like wolf-like creatures. And what's cool about this film, it holds up pretty good, is that when there's a lot of images of the murders shown from the eyes of the wolves. So you get this kind of like, like when something is like a heat-seeking type thing, like that kind of image. With
like the Predator almost. Yeah,
right. And that's what you see. And you see the person fighting it off, but just, eventually dying, but done with this imagery. It's a good film. So, but I don't think the music ever actually got into the soundtrack, or maybe part of it did, but it was released on Flowers of Romance. Now, there was an aborted fourth studio album that was recorded in 1982, which would be later released by Levene himself as an album called Commercial Zone. And it had included contributions from bassist Pete Jones. Lydon and Atkins claimed that Levene stole the master tapes. Okay. Atkins stayed on through a live album, which turned out to be one of the first digital live albums ever recorded, called Live in Tokyo. And that included Lydon and a band of session musicians. It wasn't any of the guys in the band in Tokyo. Now, that's a great live album. It really is. And it has a great cover of Lydon with his hair totally standing up, and he's on a street corner in Tokyo, and it just says Live in Tokyo. In 1984, after that album was aborted, they would regroup with different members, okay, and record an album called This Is What You Want, This Is What You Get. There was 5 re-recorded songs from Commercial Zone, which was kind of changed around arrangement-wise. A horn section was added in. 3 new tracks, okay, were also recorded. And Public Image Ltd. was moving towards a more commercial pop music and dance music direction. When I say dance music, that's very loosely, I wouldn't really call it that, okay? It's really kind of like where in the 80s, like alternative music was at that point, had a little bit of a danceable element to it. And this kind of got them a little bit of airplay on MTV. There was a track called Bad Life. There was a track, a video for that. There was a track called This Is Not a Love Song. Do you remember that one? He's like, this is not a love song. Happy to have, not to have, not. You remember that? That was you'd hear that on LIR, that radio station. Then DRE later on would always play it.
This thing got popular later on.
It did. And they actually got a little bit of MTV airplay with that, and a little bit of a newer kind of audience. And they were starting to put out, like, if they put out a single, I guess this is the danceable thing to it. They would put out like a 12-inch remix of it that was a little bit more danceable. Remember,
Yeah.
everybody did that in the 80s.
Everybody was doing that. You would take an album it was almost like a remix album, they would call it. Not really a remix, but that's what they would be known later on as remix.
Right. Now the song "This Is Not a Love Song" had a very cool video. He was in the back of an old convertible and going through the streets. I don't know if it was Los Angeles or whatever. And the lyrics kind of lampoon the anger of some fans and music press over the band's direction they were going in.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a fuck you to those people. Okay. But it was actually their biggest international hit single, reaching number 5 in the UK and number 12 in the Netherlands. And it did very well as an import in America. It was getting some play.
It sounded more like that, like new wave almost. It was more new wave.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they were beyond that. They were just doing. There was new wave, and then there was just them. They were doing their own thing.
But they were doing that genre during that time, the new wave scene. You know.
Yeah. Now, another thing that Lydon did in 1985, solo wise, was he teamed up with Africa Bambaataa. Do you remember this song, "World Destruction"?
Yeah.
Okay, it was kind of early rap, hip hop type thing. Yeah. And African Bambaataa was a pioneer in rap and things like that. Turned out to be a kid toucher, though, right? Isn't he? Yeah. I won't even comment on that. That's disgusting. But he started a band with Bambaataa called Time Zone. Very briefly, it was just going to be a quick thing. And it was produced by Bill Laswell, who did a lot of really like heavy metal and stuff like that. He would produce Motorhead at times and things like that. It was kind of like a one-off thing that actually the video for it's pretty cool. Okay, and it was getting a lot of airplay. I remember on U68 in those days.
Yeah.
They
played.
Yeah, U68 would play edgy stuff that MTV wouldn't even play. Yeah, I missed that. Those times were great. Now, what was coming up would be one of their biggest commercial hits, and that was 1986's studio album, just called Album. Okay, and the compact disc was called Compact Disc. The cassette was called Cassette. Okay, and it was kind of like a shot at, parodying kind of generic things. There was even like a can that you could get, that's a can of beer called Beer. Okay, with the same blue and white, Public Image Limited, logo type thing. This was produced by Bill Laswell as well. Lydon and Laswell had a contentious relationship, it seems. Lydon seems to have his mind set on certain things. Maybe there was some fighting in the studio and all that. There was also like an endless rotation of different musicians, which I think Lydon didn't appreciate. One guitar player that has to be mentioned that did some great work on this album is the famous Steve Vai. Okay, Steve Vai did some of his best guitar work. Of course, he would go on to play with like David Lee Roth and other people. Okay, and even himself, he considers it some of his best guitar work. But he's also, at the time, he really didn't acknowledge that he was even on the album. I think it was kind of like an embarrassment at first, but then later on in time, I think he's appreciated that he was on it. At that point, Ginger Brett Baker from Cream was actually brought in to play drums. That was a big deal. Okay, and album basically had, it was very just generic, the whole look of it. To tour it in 1986, Lydon recruited former Susie and the Banshees guitarist John McGeoch, and world multi-instrumentalist and former Damned guitarist Lou Edmonds, bassist Alan Diaz, and former The Pop Group and Slits drummer Bruce Smith. Diaz had previously played with David Lloyd and Andrew Edge in Europa Lula. As the years went on, Public Image's lineup grew steadier as the sound of the albums drifted towards dance culture and drum-oriented pop music. Edmonds would leave in 1988 due to tinnitus, and Smith left in 1990. McGeoch and Diaz were members of Pill from 1986 to 1992, making them the group's longest-running members besides John Lydon himself. Wow. I do have to mention that I saw Public Image Ltd on the album tour in '86 at Radio City Music Hall, which is a great place to see anybody.
Yeah, that is.
If you ever have a chance to see any show, any music at Radio City, do it. All right, because the sound is incredible in there. But it was a gig with, I believe, with Susie and the Banshees, or I forget if it was them or In Excess. But they opened, and great show. I remember that very well. And Biden did do a couple of Pistol songs at the end. He did like Anarchy in the UK and God Save the Queen. Public Image Ltd in 1987 would release the album Happy. Oh, I have to back up for a second. On album in 1986, the main track that was released as a single was the song Rise. Okay. And it had an expression in there that Lydon took from his grandmother. Okay. There's a song in the song. It says, "May the road rise with you." And it was a Irish kind of expression. Okay. Meaning, may the road rise with you. Hopefully you have good luck. Okay. And he sings that through the whole song. And it was a cool video. Okay. You could see that Lydon was crazy. His hair was like bright orange, partially dreadlocked, standing straight up. Okay. And he's singing this song in an ill-fitted suit and just kind of like, he looked absolutely nuts, which was what he was trying to do. Okay. And that was an MTV hit, that song. And you still hear that song. Okay. It's one of my favorite songs from them, one of my favorite songs of all time. So 1987, after the album was done and out and they had a follow-up, they released an album called Happy, question mark, like a question. Right. And on that tour, they were the supporting act for In Excess's Kick album. Okay. Bill Laswell, who produced Pill's previous studio album, was at one point supposed to produce this album, Happy, but this idea fell through allegedly because Laswell wanted to replace the Pill lineup with his own session musicians, as had been the case with Album. Okay. And that was something that Lydon didn't want to agree with. He was like, no, I'm not doing that. He had this kind of like lineup for 6 years that would be solid, and he wanted to keep it. Happy was ultimately produced by Gary Langan, and there was the track Seattle that was released as a single, and then there was also an abortion-themed single called The Body, which was a sequel sort of to the Sex Pistols song Bodies, which is also about abortion. In 1989, Public Image Ltd toured with New Order and the Icelandic band the Sugar Cubes as the Monsters of Alternative Rock tour. Pill's 7th studio album, actually called 9, because if you count the 2 live albums, it's their 9th official release, appeared in early 1989 and featured the single Disappointed, which is a great track. The album was produced by Stephen Hague, who was known for working with the Pet Shop Boys and New Order, Eric, also known as E.T. Thorngren, and the band. Okay. In 1990, Public Image Ltd's song The Order of Death from the album This Is What You Want, This Is What You Get was prominently featured in Richard Stanley's film Hardware. That same year saw the release of Public Image Ltd's first compilation album called The Greatest Hits So Far, which featured one new song on there. It was an environmentally themed track called Don't Ask Me. The rest of the album consisted of previously released material, though remixes of several songs were used rather than the original album versions, and the album remake of This Is Not a Love Song was included rather than the original single version. Lydon claims that he wanted the album to be 28 tracks long, which wasn't going to happen. The eventual 14-track listing was a compromise with Virgin Records, who, according to Lydon, originally wanted only 8 tracks. The compilation, which boasted album sleeve artwork by Reg Mombasa, made number 20 on the UK album charts. So that was another decent showing for them. Okay.
Yeah, so they've been taking they've been pretty good, and even with the hiatus they took, they still taking our album. They were taking Greatest Hit album out, you know.
Right. Now, Pill's last studio album of this period was 1992's album That What Is Not, and it included a sample from the Sex Pistols song God Save the Queen. In the song, acid drops, and the younger Lydon's voice is heard chanting, no future in the outro. Lydon disbanded the group after about a year later, after Virgin Records refused to pay for the tour supporting the album, and Lydon had to pay for it out of his own pocket. The band's last concert was performed on September 18th, 1992, with the lineup of Lydon, McGeoch, Ted Chow on guitar and keyboards, Mike Joyce of the Smiths on drums, and Russell Webb on bass. Alan Diaz, Pill's bassist since the spring of '86, quit the band in the summer of '92, some months before Public Image Ltd. Itself went on hiatus. In '93, the band was on hiatus, and Lydon began working on his memoirs. And he wrote a book called Rotten, No Irish, No Blacks, No Dogs. Okay.
What a title.
Yeah, well, it's a reference to, signs that would appear in England at the time when he was growing up, that you couldn't be that if you were looking for a job. They didn't want you.
Wow.
Okay. So in 1996, he regrouped with Stevie Jones, Glenn Matlock, and Paul Cook for the Sex Pistols reunion. It was called the Filthy Luger Tour. He also released a solo studio album called Psycho's Path in 1997. 1999 saw the release of the 4-disc Public Image Ltd. Compilation Plastic Box. It offered a more comprehensive retrospective of Pill than the Greatest Hits So Far album did. Plastic Box contained a mixture of previously released and unreleased material spanning Pill's entire career, although no material from Commercial Zone or Pill's 2 live albums were included. In the compilation's liner notes, Lydon wrote that this collection represents a comma and not a full stop. I fully intend to carry on with Pill, and there will be more in the future. And that would start around 2009. Okay. Yeah. So it was quite a few years that they'd been around, a good 15 years. But in September of 2009, it was announced that Pill would reform for 5 UK shows. And that was their first, actually 17 years, the first time they were performing live. Lydon financed the reunion using money he earned during a UK TV commercial for Country Life Butter. He did a commercial. Okay. He says, the money that I earned from that has now gone completely lock, stock, and barrel into reforming Pill. Not bad.
He put his own money in it.
Yep. Now, October 15th, 2009, Lydon registered the private limited company, Public Image Ltd. Twin Limited, as his new music publishing company in the UK. The new lineup consisted of Lydon, earlier members Bruce Smith and Lou Edmonds, plus multi-instrumentalist Scott Firth. They played to generally positive reviews in late 2009, coinciding with the 30th anniversary of Metal Box. However, protested Lydon, this tour has absolutely nothing to do with an anniversary of anything. We didn't even know that Virgil was planning on re-releasing a very limited edition of Metal Box because they never bothered to confer with us. The tour did spawn a live album called A Life 2009. In April 2010, Public Image Ltd. Began an extensive North American tour, including a sub-headlining appearance at the Coachella Festival. I did see them in New York City at I think it was Terminal 5. I think it was at that venue. I saw them. And what's so memorable about that is I ran into Handsome Dick Manitoba, who's from the Dictators, who's a friend of the podcast, and ran into him. This was years before I knew you, and we were doing podcasts. But he was cool. I was hanging out with him for the show a little bit.
I think you seen what band just got back together?
Oh,
Oasis.
Oh yeah, I did hear that. But is it the two brothers or is it just one of them?
This is the two brothers.
Okay, should be interesting. Okay, maybe they'll beat the shit out of each other on stage again. Okay, now in 2010 they came back. Public Image Ltd. They did some shows at the Coachella Festival. They played several European concerts in July 2010, and at the Summer Sonic Festival in Japan in August of 2011. In November of 2009, Lydon said Public Image Ltd. Might even re-enter the studio if they could raise enough money from their December tour or from a record company. So Public Image Ltd. Then went to Tel Aviv, Israel, to headline the Heineken Music Conference 2010 festival in August of 2010. The group at that point met with criticism for breaking this artistic boycott of Israel by some British musicians over the Israeli policies against the Palestinians. Basically, Lydon said that he really resented the presumption that I'm going there to play to right-wing Nazi Jews. If Elvis fucking Costello wants to pull out of a gig in Israel because he suddenly got this compassion for Palestinians, then good on him. But I have absolutely one rule, right? Until I see an Arab country, a Muslim country with a democracy, I won't understand how anyone can have a problem with how they're treated.
Wow.
Interesting and very controversial statements from Lydon there. He's a man that thinks for himself. November 30th, 2011, the band's own label, Public Image Ltd. Official Limited, was registered as a private limited company in the UK. So he's making moves business-wise to control everything.
Yeah, which is very smart.
He is very smart like that. Public Image Ltd. Released the vinyl-only EP, One Drop, in late April 2012, which was eventually made available for streaming. The new 12-track studio album, This Is Pill, followed in May. This Is Pill was the band's first studio album in 20 years. It's a good record. There's a track on there called One Drop. Very cool. On July 28th, 2015, the band uploaded a promo video for lead single Double Trouble from their next studio album, What the World Needs Now, via their YouTube channel. On August 21st, Public Image Ltd. Released the single backed with the song Betty Page and a non-album track, Turkey Tits. What the World Needs Now is Public Image Ltd.'s 10th studio album, released in September of 2015, and they actually, in November of that year, played the track Double Trouble on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which I remember.
Wow.
In December 2016, the group released super deluxe editions of Metal Box and album. Okay. In 2018, there was a fantastic documentary everybody should see called The Public Image is Rotten. Also in 2018, the band released The Public Image is Rotten Songs from the Heart, a compilation CD, DVD box set to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the band. It consisted of 5 CDs, 2 DVDs, and it included B-sides, rarities, radio sessions, live concerts, 12-inch mixes, and promo videos. I'm trying to remember if they were on John Peel. I think probably, okay, but I can't recall. I'm thinking that might have been the radio sessions that was included in that. On January 9, 2023, it was announced that the band was one of the 6 acts chosen to compete in Eurosong 2023 for the chance to represent Ireland in the Eurovision Song Contest 2023.
Wow.
They competed with the song Hawaii, which is I heard this song and it's just something that they've never sounded like this before. It's a haunting kind of song where he's talking about Hawaii, okay, and it's kind of like a very personal piece of writing for him because his wife Nora, of many years, was sick for a long time with Alzheimer's.
Oh shit!
And yeah, she was actually Ari Up from the Slits' mother. Nora was a very lovely woman. She was about 20 years older than John, and they married like in the late 70s, and he stayed with her all those years. They had a very happy marriage, from what I understand. Her name was Nora Forster originally. She was German, and Ari Up would pass away in the 2000s, and Lydon had to raise her two kids, I believe two kids, that were with. She was living in Jamaica and raising them as almost like Rastafarians. They never went to school, nothing like that. So he got these kids, and in his book, Anger is an Energy, which I recommend to anybody. It's a fantastic read about John Lydon's life. I mean, he talks about this and basically had to raise these kids from the bottom up, teach them math, teach them, normal kid stuff that they didn't know.
Oh, they had no idea.
So, you think about what he's been through to try to stay true to himself. So many lawsuits with Malcolm McLaren trying to control his music. Then he had, his wife's daughter, Ari Up, pass away. He took on the ability of the responsibility of raising the kids. Then in April of last year, Nora passed away from the Albatross. Yeah. So he's had some life. Okay. Yeah. And I have to mention too, he's a big Trump supporter, which, doesn't fly well in the music community. And a lot of people give him shit for it. Yeah. I think he has a lot of balls. I think he's one of the most independent minded, I don't give a fuck what you think about me person I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's sometimes you gotta have that, man. It's like it's ridiculous, man. People gotta speak their opinion.
Now, in August of 2023, there was an album called End of the World that was released. It had the track Hawaii on it, and it did okay. They went and they did a European tour after that. I don't think they did anything in America on that. Probably there was no audience for it. So that's it. That's Public Image Limited. They're still around.
Yeah.
It's really, it's John Lydon's vehicle for his music, his whole life. Of course, he'll never be out of the shadow of the Sex Pistols, nor should he.
No.
Okay. But this is really like what he is artistically, and I think he's like a fucking genius, to be honest with you. He's really a perfect example of taking something totally experimental, avant-garde-ish, and somehow getting it to be a little commercial in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
But not even caring if it did or not. Okay, like he was influenced by so many things. One band that he was very influenced by was Can. Okay, and we did a show on Can.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, and I do mention John Lydon in that quite a bit because he's always been outspoken about the band. But this is kind of like you could hear his avant-garde influences. Who would have thought this punk rock guy had it in him? He's just like a fucking screaming maniac in the Sex Pistols, but he really was talented.
Talented. Look at the longevity he had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about that. How long he been around now and still taking out albums and still singing and controlling his narrative, controlling his music. It's a big deal for him,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I always kind of pay attention when he has something coming out. I'll check it out. I'll go see them live once in a while. I've seen them a couple of times.
I want to see that documentary.
The Public Image is Rotten.
Yeah.
I saw it maybe about a year after it came out. I remember it was a little hard to find in the beginning, and then it started streaming around, and it's really fantastic. It really just goes into the history of the band and everything I just described, and there's a lot of video of them TV performances and stuff like that. Very cool.
Not bad, not bad.
So that's all I got, Mr. Rossi.
Not a bad show, man. So this was Public Image Limited, and wow, seemed like the way that they're still around, which is something else. Even with the hiatus, they got back together, and they still play music. They'll probably take another album out in 2, 3 years if nobody passes away.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they will. I mean, and he doesn't seem to. I mean, he paints. He does a lot of things.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem to be running out of any kind of artistic ability. I'm sure he's going through a lot with his wife passing away last year, but sometimes these artists can turn it around and put a great album out in that aftermath.
So, Mike, where can we find you if we need to?
Well, I'm all over social media. If you're looking for me, the best place to find me is on Facebook. Under Rocko Mike on Facebook. Also, the Rockshow podcast group page on Facebook. Me and Rob are on there, and we post songs of the day, news, things about bands, great pictures. We've got a big audience now. I think it's over 3,000 people now in the group.
A lot of people.
Yeah, and it's been a great 5 years with that. Then if you're looking for me on Instagram and X, you could check me out as Rocker Mike 212. I'm also on Truth Social, Getter, Clout Hub, and MeWe as Rocker Mike. How about you, Rob?
But wait up, before we move on, can you show that great T-shirt you got again?
Oh yeah, Mineola Diner. Everybody, if you're at Mineola out on Long Island, go to this diner, okay? And if you're coming in for breakfast, mention Rocker Mike, me, and you get a free cup of coffee. Or if you want a soda, mention Rocker Mike. You can get a free soda.
Not bad, not bad.
Tell them you heard it on the Rock Show podcast or Rocker Mike. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good deal. Free coffee, free soda. You save a few bucks there. It's not a bad deal.
Oh yeah, and the food is fantastic in there. But make sure you get early. They go in there early. They close early.
So what time? Around 3, 4?
I think they're closed up by 3, 4 o'clock. But really, they're more of a breakfast spot. But it's a great place.
All right.
I mean, they have lunch too. They have lunch.
Not bad. And if you guys want to reach me, you can get me on Facebook, Instagram, or on the Getting Lumped Up website, and also the Rock Show group page, which is doing very good. A lot of people are there, and it's only a page when we talk about rock and roll or not politics. We talk about rock and roll. If you do talk politics there, I will delete you.
Yep, I will delete you on that page, and we don't go there. But you want to talk shit with me on my Rocko Mike page, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Always battling with people every day.
So with that note, people, the next time we'll see you will be the Aerosmith, the 70s. Aerosmith in the 70s. That will be show number 207 as we forward to our 250 rock show, which will reach that milestone soon. And
next year.
We're also going to have, it's almost getting soon, we're going to have the year end again.
Our December show, we got to call the clown. Yeah. We got to call the clown.
Call the clown and see what we can do. So people, remember, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you next time.
Take care, people.